Today, 52 SE special guest. We have Joe from Manhattan Aquariums, Unique Corals and Marco Rocks. Yet again, you probably know him if you've watched a few of these already.
Yep.
He shares his experience and characteristics of the best tanks you've ever seen. You told me you've been doing this since you were 13, over 3 decades. You've seen some good tanks. So what are the characteristics of those best tanks? We're going to ask questions like, what does vision, pre-planning, and end goal mean? What is maintaining balance on a global scale? What will the wow factor be? How will it complement the room? How will it withstand the test of time? Large animals are impressive. And how to extract happiness from it never being perfect. All kinds of counsel here. Like, the details of this will be the characteristics of the best tanks of 30 years of reefing.
Yeah, that was a hard one too, because every tank is unique and they all have something that they hit upon that makes them really special, especially the best ones. Mm-hmm. And for me, and I think a lot of people, is the tank speaks to you in a certain way, and typically that way is through inspiration. Mm-hmm. Going into a fish store, I remember at 14, 15 years old, I'd ride my bike to Pets Plus in Freeport. And all the aquariums were in the basement. And when I go through the regular dog, cat food stuff, and I work my way down the stairs, all of a sudden the humidity and the fish room smell would hit you. And that would like condition your sense of like, all right, here it comes. And then that first reef tank was along the stairs, and then there was a second reef tank, and they would inspire me, and it made me just want to go home and work on my tanks. Those were some of the best tanks because of what it did to inspire me.
One of the things that inspired me was a local club meeting I went to, and you go into this gentleman's basement, and it dedicated the whole basement to this display, the whole thing, right? And it wasn't like I mean, it's always gonna be expensive, but it wasn't like an expensive fancy install. Mm-hmm. It was 3 tanks with under sump equipment, but it was, I mean, I'm gonna butcher this, but like, I want to say this next size bigger than a 180, but there's 3 of them. You know, there's one in this wall, one in that wall, and one in this wall, and it was acros, LPS, and softies, right? And you know, like, what inspired me is like that he like really cared uniquely about these animals. You can probably now see it here, actually, but like, you know, that he was thinking about it to that level, and decided to create displays on them, and they were stunning, man. It was like one of the most popular meetings that I've been to, where there's so many people here to see these things.
I think telling a story is what an aquarium is supposed to do, right? And you know, that mixed garden reef without a theme or a purpose is like storytelling without connecting the different characters and the different subplots. It's just bleh. It can be beautiful, but to me at least, you know, it needs to inspire, it needs to tell a story. And that's what kind of the series, I feel like it might be going, where we can do a lot more than just a mixed garden reef. We can set up a specific biotope that can tell a story. I wanted to take it so far as to actually put a plaque next to the aquariums in my store and say, this is a representative reef of you know, the Seychelles or the Australian Great Barrier Reef at low tide, or a seagrass bed in Bora Bora or something, you know, something to really tie it to a physical location. But to me, the general term of what is the characteristics of a great aquarium, and there's several, is that first, that inspiration has to be there.
Okay, so the first one here is, what is vision, man? Like, you got to create a vision for this tank, pre-planning to end goal to mean. So I got a vision, I'm planning, and then I'm producing the end goal. And one of the things, before we get on this, actually, I just want to elaborate on what you said, which is, you know, think of the mixed tank. This is where all of us start. And then, like, if you think about that as like every hobby, though, like, you know, it doesn't matter if it's like radio control or if it was cooking or whatever. Like, you try all these different things, and then you eventually find like one, man, that really speaks to you, and you end up flying only planes or only helicopters, you know, or, you know, like, you do the broad spectrum approach, and then you kind of like gravitate in a different direction, and that's usually where you do the most amazing things. So, I don't know.
My home fish room, you know, I could do anything I want, really. I've got access to all the cool corals and everything. And I went freshwater, dare I say it, blasphemy. because I don't get to do a lot with freshwater, and freshwater is what inspired me to get into this business, this hobby in the first place. So now I've got these different biotopes in my garage that I converted into I guess you can call it a man cave, but it's a fish room. And it's got the South American Amazon biotope. It's got the Malaysian biotope. It's got like a paludorium style with plants and trees coming out of it. And each one tells its own story. I even got an antique tank from the 1850s, a J.W. Fisk tank with a single paradise fish in there. So each tank, again, tells that story. But you can do the same thing with saltwater.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, we're train wrecking here, but like I can't help it. Like, what's interesting is that, like, sometimes you get this perception that, you know, people don't cross the boundaries between saltwater and freshwater, or, you know, one's better than the other one, or something like that. You know, because whatever you're doing is better, of course. Right?
Yeah.
All right, but like I think the crossover is like 50%. People actually have both. You know, and somebody asked me the other day, you know, like, would you ever do a 52 weeks of freshwater, right? And I thought, well, hey, man, like, I don't know anything about freshwater. Not a single thing. Only thing I've ever done is kill beta before, you know, like as I was like 8, right? But like, you know what I thought about? I was like, wouldn't it be fun to create a like 52 weeks? It's a little bit different than this one, but it would be like, hey, this is Ryan. I've been doing reefing, man, for 20 years, right? I'm going to go into freshwater here, and I'm going to learn it all in real time.
Wow.
Research every last thing that I can research about that thing, and then share it with you guys as I'm learning in real time, and apply it to these tanks behind me. Your biotopes.
These freshwater tanks are stunning. When you could recreate a lake or a jungle floor, river, I mean, it's just as magical as any coral reef. And to me, I've come full circle, because I got out of freshwater and I got heavy into reef, and I'm still heavy into reef, but then something was missing. And when I got freshwater again, I felt kind of complete. Now that sounds a little hokey or whatever, but it's my roots, and now I do both.
I mean, I feel like this is such an excuse that I just like can't help but like lean on, but it is also real, and it won't be real, you know, in the somewhat near future, I guess. But like, dude, you have like, what is it, like a 6 and 8 year old?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this like fits that world like better, but like when they leave, you know, for college or whatever, whole different list of time, man. I got, you know.
I'm actually looking forward to that. As much as I know to be present with them now, I'm kind of looking forward to having more time. I love hanging out with my wife too, but you know, you'll have more free time when they're not.
I'm
there.
already planning my hobbies for that.
Yeah.
I'm way down.
Let's do
my
the
oldest
biotopes,
one's 7, so I'm
way.
I'm a decade plus away. Yes. All right, let's get to it. What is a vision, pre-planning, and end goal mean? The person that produced the best tanks you ever seen have done this. Give it to us.
You need to plan. I mean, if you want to do something dynamite, and it's okay to learn as you go and piecemeal it slowly and change the vision and fine tune it. But, you know, with anything in life, you know, having a plan certainly helps to figure out where you're going and not waste money along the way. In New York City, where we've designed and installed and maintained aquarium for over 20 years now, you know, everything starts with a vision, typically through the architect or the designer or the end user, the client. And we try to balance the room decor, where the sunlight is, whether it's glass or acrylic, the size of the aquarium based on the load capacity, support of the floor. All these things come into play to design the tank that complements the room the best. You know, breaking it down to more of a hobby level, you can't deny that having a plan is I mean, it's super important.
So one of the things is like, where do you get that vision from, all right? Okay, and so you got to think about this from a skill level perspective, because the vision is going to come from somewhere different at each level. So, like if I've been doing this for 30 years, and and by this I mean any hobby, I could probably pull a vision out of thin air, right? I've done everything known to man. I've like done 60 different styles of tank. My next one's already in the back of my head, man. The vision, I know I've aquascaped everything, right? Okay, well, that's a 3-decade person, which would be you, I guess. Then there's a different person, which is, all right, so I've, you know, produced this tank that was awesome. I'm ready for the next one. I'm moving houses, and the next one they want to do really cool and fun. Okay, vision now, you got to go looking for it.
Yeah,
you
well, that's
know?
the fun part.
Yeah, like
Wow.
just say, all right, I don't know. There might be some things that are like speak to me. You know, it might be certain animals or whatever. It could be, anemones, or it could be eels, or it could be whatever it might be. Okay, well now go look for those tanks. Go find the, go through the tanks of the month, and
Yep.
that kind of stuff. Some of those will probably speak to you. Don't just look at the picture. Look at the approach that they did to build the thing,
Right.
because the details in there is where you kind of like find some other inspiration. For one, there was a gentleman that produced a really cool like side-by-side acro tank, but the basis of the aquascape was all tabling acros that were dead that he bought off of eBay that were like table decorations.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and so it was tabling acros that he had built out into tables as the base of this aquascape that ultimately turned into this SPS
That's as
thing.
natural as you get. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not like somebody went into the coral reef and glued these rocks. And the corals grow on top of dead corals, on top of dead corals, on top of rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
really cool,
Right.
man.
But I think a lot of people they get their vision from whatever the hook was that convinced them they need an aquarium. Because people don't just wake up saying they need an aquarium. They either go to a friend's house, they watched a movie, and this apartment or house had this amazing tank. That kind of is the vision that they then morph to fit their particular needs. So maybe starting with whatever the hook was and modifying it to be more practical, to fit into your budget, to fit with your significant other's requests, stuff like that.
Another vision we talked about in a previous episode, which is like, hey, I want to get into lionfish. Let's go watch videos of lionfish in nature. Okay, and then just like see where they hang out.
Yeah.
And then try to recreate that.
Yep.
And now like you have a goal now.
Yeah.
It's not just build a cool escape. It's build something that looks like where that thing lives.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's okay to kind of wait, like an artist looking at a blank canvas, thinking for 20 minutes before he puts the brush to paper. Think about what your first move is going to be and try to extract enjoyment from that, because that really is some of the best part of the process. Going to the store, not knowing what I was going to see when I was buying fish at 14, 15 years old, those are some of the best memories.
So somebody once told me that people like a story where somebody has a very clear goal and then has to like overcome, a variety of obstacles to achieve it.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
There'll be downs and there'll be ups and whatever. And what I've found is when people come to see the tank, and like sharing the tank is like one of my greatest joys, right? When people come to see the tank, it's the stories, man. It's not just the display. It's like, what is that fish? What's he doing with that shrimp? And I get to tell the story of how, the symbiosis between the shrimp and the goby, or between the pom-pom crab and the anemones in its hands, or the chromis and the acro, and like why that behavior is that way. And so when you get to tell the story and somebody's like, wow, that rockscape's really cool, like, yeah, man, I spent like, the better part of a week like looking at different photos of where this, lionfish lives, and I found out is it likes to live in this area under these ledges. It's an ambush predator. Sometimes it likes to be upside down in here and stuff. And so I tried to accommodate for it, and then the person's like, wow, you sure nailed it, right?
Yeah.
That is when you say, what's the characteristics of the best tanks you've ever seen? One that's missing here is one that has a story.
Yeah, that's true.
I had a mission, and I overcame obstacles to achieve it, not just a collection.
Sure. Yep.
I don't know how you can see me getting excited.
No, it's like the tank is the book cover, and then once you open up that cover and you start explaining everything inside, it's like that's the meat of it. That's the enjoyable part of people.
Why does all this stuff exist in here? Can you tell that story with it?
Right.
Yeah, really fun. Okay, next one. What does maintaining balance mean on a global scale? So balance within the best tanks you've ever seen.
So I think the characteristics of most successful tank is they've reached some kind of balance. And that could be, balance is a general term, but the environment is conducive to supporting that animal. There's not too many fish in there, and if there is too many fish, they feed a lot. Like caring for some aquariums at the Camden Aquarium, we would have way too many fish for a tank. Like we had this Jack Crevalle tank, probably had 200 3-pound fish in the tank, and the tank was only like 1,000 gallons, and they all just swim in a circle. And by any means, that tank was completely overcrowded, and we'd have to put in 20 pounds of food into it every day. But that tank got massive water changes and massive filtration, and so it was in balance. Even though it was extreme, it's like running an engine at close to red line. Everything was balanced. You had the right air-fuel mixture, you had the right cooling happening, you had the right engine management, everything to keep that engine happy at such a high RPM. All these tanks have found that balance. They're not constantly yo-yoing up and yo-yoing down.
So that is really easy to understand. Like in balance, I would have, if I have this amount of fish, I should have this level of filtration.
Yeah.
Or better yet, if I had this many fish, I should have this much food input.
Yeah.
And then I should have this much resulting filtration.
Export, yep.
If I had this many corals, I'm going to pack it to the brim. I should have this much ionic replenishment,
Yep.
These solutions, right?
It's hard to achieve success if you don't have that balance.
Okay, that means not implementing technology for no reason.
Right.
Like I had to have a problem or purpose that served the biology of the animal, in sequence. But the inverse is true now too, right? So how many tanks have you seen that have 3 fish and then just like a ridiculous amount of filtration?
Yeah,
and then
that's
the
not balanced.
corals are all pale,
Right.
out of balance.
So, I mean, if we can talk, because we've already done a couple of train wrecks and gone off, went to Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute, I think it was last year or the year before, and we watched their experimental methods of dealing with nutrient export and waste management that they're hoping to prototype there and export to areas of very low nutrition like sub-Saharan Africa, where they can use sunlight and very limited resources, limited fresh water, to grow marine algae like ova, which could be a seaweed that people can consume, fish, invertebrates that you can also eat, and every one of these tanks provided filtration for the animal that was upstream. So for example, they had these giant red drum, these fish swimming in a giant tank. It was probably 1,000 of them. And they knew how much weight in fish they had. The pH in that saltwater tank was 7.9, 7.8. Coming out, it was 5.8, going into the tank was 7.8, 7.9. Depending on where they tested in the tank, the pH was different. And the effluent coming out was 5.8, 5.9 for a saltwater system, because the fish are excreting so much waste. They're just neutralizing all the alkalinity, and the acidity is dropping it. You know what they did with that water? They fed it right into a calcium reactor, and they didn't use any CO2. And when they set up to do this system, they were told it probably won't work. Well, that low pH salt water was perfect. They didn't need CO2. So the calcium reactor dissolved, added its ions to it, the water buffered up, and then they sent that with the excess CO2 right into their outdoor ova beds and mangrove beds. The ova grew like crazy in this tumbling sunlit system. They would harvest the ova every day and get hundreds of pounds. They could feed that to people if they wanted.
That's crazy.
And then they had urchins and shrimp. The point of this is, I don't know, what is the point?
The point of it was balance, right?
Balance. It was balance, and it was so extreme, but it was awesome.
Okay, so again, I keep saying this, because I think this will be a ongoing conversation of because we're diving deep into this. We're diving on all these tanks. You're going to see like a lot of thought go into the biology of the animal, and then the resulting approach to filtration and chemistry and all these different things, right? Okay, are we over-engineering it? Or are we, looking for the right balance, thinking about how we serve these things, thinking about what's going into each one, and then, adapting it instead of this like one size fits all, do it this way and it will always work. I can't wait, because I think this is going to be just an ongoing debate on which one of those things.
That's the beauty of it, yeah.
Okay, this one I love too. All right, so characteristic of the best tanks you've ever seen. What will be your wow factor?
Yeah.
Think about that.
Typically, a tank that leaves you inspired enough to make it on this list has some form of a wow factor. Either it's a huge tall tank, or the cabinetry is just insane, or more than likely is it has an animal housed in there that is super mature, super happy because it's healthy, or a giant coral head that has just grown to this massive size, or a giant clam, some sort of a wow factor that just, you've never seen a clam that size or a coral head, and it just sticks with you for weeks and weeks and continues to inspire you.
That's the important part, is this wow factor can be almost anything. So like, this probably wouldn't be a wow factor from a global tank standpoint, but like, have you ever seen the stairs that come out of my tank?
Stairs? Oh, I saw it in a video once,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, so on this peninsula, on 3 sides of it, there's this like
a
little
thing.
step ladder that it's only an inch thick, slides out, and then the stairs flop out both ways. And like when you get on it and then crawl in to do your work in it, or your kid gets on it to look in it, it has like, where have those been all my life? Why don't that's like
that's a wow factor.
It's the type of wow factor.
And I remembered it. Boom, I remembered it.
Okay, and then the hood on it. The hood, they have doors on them, but they're also like little like latches that slide into each other. So I can lift off the entire panel on all 3 sides and just set them on the ground and do all my work. And you have total access to the entire tank. Anybody who does maintenance and like knows what it takes to care for a tank. Wow. Right? Now this isn't a display you showed to somebody else, but like you and me would say that when you see it, you're like, oh great. But inside, like over and over and over again, and I think this was my inspiration to go down this, is the one thing that people said over and over again about this tank was the aquascape, right? Like the aquascape that TSA, Kevin over there built, like it's just stunning. And everybody walks up and is like, that aquascape is awesome, right? That's the, like, you know, the basis
wow
of
factor.
it. So I think in that tank we were kind of shot for the moon. I mean, the sump's got like a
wow factor. Come on, look at you are. Everything's got to be. This isn't fair.
It's true. It's true. But it gives you ideas. Like the wow factor, I've seen people who trick out the front of it, like with LEDs and like screens and stuff.
People getting so creative now. I love it.
Yeah.
They're getting with the acrylic itself glows. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
You know, you could shine a light on it. Boom, the acrylic is blue or orange. And really cool stuff.
It just needs to inspire that feeling. Now, your giant clam is a different approach. The giant, you know, like acro that's grown from like, you know, 1 inch. So for instance, like your wow factor might not even be, you know, something that exists today. It might be part of the planning here, right? Which is my wow factor, you're not going to see for 3 years. I'm going to plant a bunch of little frags in here, and they're going to be way far apart from her. But in it is going to be only acros that are dinner plate shaped.
You know, the mangrove that WWC has in their lagoon tank, you know, they put it in when it was still impressive, but now things like a tree. And now that became the wow factor over time.
Yeah, man. Like, so like if you can like plan and think about that, I don't know how you get around it, but that is a characteristics of the best tank you ever seen. It's something that makes you say, remember that tank that we saw that one time, man, that did that one really cool thing? You know, has that characteristic to it. And so many of them don't have to be, you know, all that crazy. You know, you just have to think, how can I create something cool in here? And really, I got to go find something like cool that somebody else has done, and then say, how do I make this my own?
Right.
You know? All right, this one. This is a progress too. I don't think anybody would think about this on their first tank, but you might think about it on your second tank and so on. Kind of depends. But how will it complement the room?
This is one that we have a lot of experience with in New York. Typically, the apartments were not super big, and the budgets were bigger than the room could really allow for the tank. So people wanted a tank that was too big for the room. And I guess the analogy would be getting a TV that's just too big. You know how you get a 60 or a 70 or an 80 inch, and they give you the recommended distance for viewing it for maximum pleasure. Well, an aquarium really is no different. You know, you don't want the aquarium to be competing with the TV. So having an aquarium here and a TV above it, or I've done aquariums where there's a fireplace below it. It's like two competing elements. It's like putting artwork above another piece of artwork. Sometimes it works, but most galleries, you have a piece of art, white wall around it. Piece of art, white wall around. There's a reason you want your eye to focus just on the aquarium because it tells such a powerful story. Why distract with anything else? And have it match the room. And there is no magic number that I can think of, but it's what feels right. So when you have experience, you could look at a room and say, you know, a 200-gallon tank is the right size to this. 400 gallon, it would just be like, what are you trying to prove? It's too big. I know you can afford it, but it's too big for the room.
Yeah, I think about it like, if you're gonna boil it down when you're picking like the size and stuff and for it, and then like, thinking of tank size and shape and woodwork and stuff on it, match the room. I mean, it's the first thing you see. When you walk up and just like, first part of the display is whether or not it looks good in the room, and is it like proportional to the other elements of the room, and like, how many times bigger can it be than your dining room table, or your sofa or TV or whatever? Like, is it kind of proportional to those sizes of things and the space that it's in? Like, I think this is one of those things where you're perfecting it, too. And like, did I just get like a pine stand for it, or did I get something that like loosely matches the decor of the room, or did I go all in and, have Benner make me something that like, looks exactly like the woodwork in the room?
Chris, yeah, we're both fortunate enough. I have a system that he did, and it's amazing.
Yeah,
but we're also assuming,
for mine, I sent him a door.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally took off one of the cabinet doors and sent it to him.
Yeah.
And he made it look exactly like that.
Yeah, he's
I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
But like, that is one total crazy end of it, right?
Yeah, we're assuming people are buying an aquarium to complement a finished room. Certainly there's different goals. If your goal is to coral farm, or your goal is to just breed fish, or it's a spare room and you don't care, then some of these rules go out the window. You want bigger, you want more capacity to hold stuff. But as a general thing, match the room if it's supposed to be an aesthetically pleasing design choice.
This is kind of deviating too, but like, I keep thinking of this one room in my last house, which is the living room, which is where I wish I really would have put a tank, because that's where my family would have interacted with it the most. And in that room, instead of putting 360 gallons down the basement, in that room, I bet you something like this, 90 gallon-ish tank that's right here, like a 3-foot wide tank, that's a little extra tall, would have been like a really complimented that room. My family would have engaged with it really well. It would have fit like my lifestyle, and I could have really put a lot of thought into something that was like a little bit smaller as well.
Yeah.
And because of that, I would have been more successful as well.
Right.
Well, I don't know.
It's true. No,
think about it like all those ways. You could complement the room. It could be the furniture wise. It could be the size. It could be what's in it.
Yep.
But it really is just it's half a visual display that's the tank, half the visual display in the out. It's also just like really half a piece of furniture.
Yeah. And also be mindful of the room it's in. It's hard to get tanks completely silent. You're the type of person that can't watch your TV if there's any kind of noise or something, or you have to sleep in that room and you can't sleep with white noise. Be mindful of that too. The smaller the tank. I remember doing a tank for the owner of the Jets, and he couldn't have any noise. And this is when the JBJ chiller had to be inside the stand because we couldn't have anything out. We had mag drive pumps. We didn't have really good quiet DC pumps. And it was so challenging. I created baffles, rubber, layers of rubber under the mag drive. Insulated the door with 1-inch foam, but then you trap all the heat in. So these are challenges that you got to think about when you're designing.
I'm going to give a rule of thumb here.
Yeah.
Okay. Just made this up. Okay. Your tank stand that's going in, the size of this thing, you should give this as much thought as you give your dining room table, your sofa, or your TV stand. Give it at least that much thought, and probably a neighborhood of that budget.
Right.
Because it will be the most impressive piece of furniture in the entire room.
Yep.
Nothing in that room will be more impressive than this thing.
Yep.
But man, like, you just don't mount like a Ferrari on like,
cheap pine stand or something.
Yeah.
And for years I was reefing on a real budget, and I would buy a metal stand, put magnets on it, and get thin acrylic and have them cut it nice and magnet on. It looked like a Formica. I mean, it looked like a high-end stand, but it was totally reefing on a budget, and it was highly functional. You just take the panel off, and now you've got access to the whole thing. So if you can't afford a really high-end polished thing, there's ways to get around it, still make it look good without compromising and going with the cinder block, 4x4 routine. I mean, you don't have to settle for that.
I don't know, man. Like, we get lost in the cost conversation. Like, my first tank probably cost me 10% of my total yearly income. That sounds insane, man. Who would do that?
Yeah.
But like, at the same time, man, I see people all the time, like telling me that that's insane, yet they're installing a bathroom in their house they'll never use.
Yeah.
It just sits down there. They spent 20 grand on a bathroom they never use. Or, they're buying a Lexus instead of a Toyota, or a Toyota instead of a Hyundai, or whatever it might be. Like, I don't know. I'm just getting home driving to work, man. I'm not racing this thing.
Right.
Like, I'd rather have, this tank in my house and have it look right than, have, whatever car it is you want.
Right. Well, you got to pick and choose. Yeah. I mean,
I don't know. It's just that thing, man. So like, people get lost in all that, and it's just, I don't know, allocate your resources to what brings you joy, and that's the right answer.
Yep.
All right, the next one here is how to withstand the test of time. So this is characteristics of the best tanks you've ever seen. Withstands the test of time because large animals are impressive.
Yeah, so, how do you measure success? And we touched upon this earlier. Just because someone has been able to keep a regal butterfly, a regal angel, or an Achilles tang, or Moorish idol, any of the fish that are, labeled to be expert only, keeping it 6 months, is that really enough? Is that success? But when you've hit 6 years or 7 years or 10 years, that's impressive. And that lends itself to being a characteristic of a very, very awesome tank. My friend Dave Botwin's got, Achilles tangs for years, and I struggled with them. Years ago, I struggled with them. I couldn't figure them out. Now I know how to get them going. But I guess my point is, things that grow that you've had for a while, giant, huge colonies, beautiful school of antheus that, when they're supposed to not live that long, yet they're fat as can be and they're staying alive for years. I mean, that's a characteristic of an awesome tank.
So I think of one of the times I met Sanjay. I was looking at a tank with him, and it's like, oh, this is awesome. He's like, I'm like, that's interesting. So he elaborated on it, and it's just like, yeah, I like tanks with corals that are big, huge mother colonies. And, this is beautiful. It's got tons of little corals in it, and they're every shade of the rainbow. But I've seen a million of those. What I don't see that often is people who, have cared for them for like a long time and created these colonies. That is such a cool, different way to think about it, right? It's not a collection of as many as I can do, but how well I do each one.
And if that colony is 18 inches across or 2 feet, that alkalinity never got to the point where it stressed and killed the coral. The temperature never got to 90. Like, it's a testament to the person's ability to overcome all these small hurdles, make the right decision, and that is an impressive, when you can keep a hard coral for 10, 20 years.
Outthink everything.
Yeah.
Every single thing that you think is going to happen to this thing that could, and plus 20 other ones that you don't think of, are going to happen to this tank 4 times in the time that happens, by the time we get there. Right? But I outthought them all.
You navigated from 3,000 miles away, telling your neighbor how to do this, switch this generator on, just put the pumps, forget the lights, like all these things that have to happen to preserve that life support system.
Yeah, that is one of the characteristics of the best tanks you've ever seen. Like people who have accomplished rare feats.
But I think in the essence, if I really had to distill it down, what is the most impressive? Ones that create a perfect natural looking habitat where the fish are not doing this against the glass, they're not sitting in the corner, they're acting like they would on a reef, and you don't see the equipment, the spectral lines all look good, the animals look good, the flow is good, like it just looks like they took a chunk out of the wild and stuck it in a tank. And some of the better public aquariums have accomplished this time over time.
If you get a chance, because you're in LA, right?
Yeah.
Go stop by Marine Collectors and visit Elliot's
The
facility.
Hawaiian tank?
Yeah, have you seen it?
No, we supplied them with the pump in there to get some of that flow, the panerai, but I haven't seen it. I need to go in there.
Okay, it's a 900-gallon tank, man, and it's only Hawaiian fish, right? And, you know, like, the first time I saw it, man, like, I knew what it was before I went there, and I just, like, I don't know, didn't really register to me as important, right? When I saw it, though, I was like, wow, man, like Kauai specifically is like, there's a special place in my heart. Like, the wheels hit the ground and my mind's already turned off. It's like the only place on the planet.
Me too.
Right? Like
the Poly Coast. It's where I decided to change my business venture in 2001 in Kauai. That's the only place that has really spoken to me. That's funny. It's just like my brain just like finally relief. It's the only place, man. I don't know where. This is where it is for me. And it's funny that it would be the same. Yep.
Yeah, but like, so when I saw it though, it brought me there. I saw all these fish, and because the tank is so big, you know, there's like this, you know, school of like, you know, I don't know, man, there must be 20 of these yellow tangs in there, and they don't just like, you know, do their normal thing, and they swim like they do in the ocean.
And they graze.
And they all come together and eat together, and, you know, and then they go on to the next thing, you know. And I'm like, oh my gosh, man, I want that so bad. Because I think about, like, if I were to build this in my house, basically what I've done is brought this place that I love into my home where I can see it every day, man. Like, and bring me that same kind of parts of that joy and remind me of what it's like to do this thing I love. Okay. That, man, is part of the best tanks I've ever seen.
I mean, this is, you know, knocking my own thing, but one of the best tanks I ever set up was in one of my offices in New York, where I had a giant Carlson surge device. And I don't know if people are familiar with that, but it was behind the scenes. It was a giant bucket, maybe 40 gallons, and it had a 2-inch dump pipe that went into the tank. It just looked like an elbow sticking out, but it had rock work in front of it. And this giant bucket would slowly fill up with sump water. And then once it hit a certain point, it would start a siphon, and all that water would rush in 15 seconds. And I had the overflow designed to handle it. But what it did is it created this micro bubble wave. And all the fish would act like a wave just crashed on the reef, and the Achilles tang would graze on the rocks in it. I mean, it was, the wrasses would all swim in it, and you could see them fighting the current. And I'd just sit there waiting for this wave to crash. And then in the lull, they would all go about and act differently. And it's like they knew as soon as they hear those first bubbles, they all get into position, and they're waiting for planktonic food that the waves would normally deliver to them. They're waiting for whatever bits of algae and copepods washed off the inner lining of that garbage pail. It's like watching that natural behavior at play. That was magical.
Wow factor. Right? Like, you went a step, way step beyond, man, than, you know, the average person would install in their tank. Yeah, way, way, way cool.
But you can do that also if you have a behind-the-scenes setup too. You can get a little bit more creative. It's hard to do with a standalone, but you could still have crazy wow factors.
I don't know, man. Just like so many things that people do in their homes, like, you know, set up bedrooms they'll never use, bathrooms they'll never use, another garage slot they'll never use, a home theater they'll never use. Like, you know, so many crazy things,
awesome
man.
Stuff, yeah.
Or I could do this thing I love.
Yep.
And everyone will tell me I'm crazy, but don't care. You know? I don't know.
Damn, Ryan's fish room must be leaking again.
Yeah, who are you to tell me what I love, man? Yeah. Okay, the next one thing is how to extract happiness from it never being perfect. That's part of a characteristic.
Yeah. That's just training your mindset. You know, the nature of these aquariums is, it is an extreme environment. Even if it's set up correctly, it's hard to take fish and corals from what's dubbed to be the most stable environment on Earth, a reef ecosystem, and stick it in a glass box in Minnesota or Los Angeles or anywhere. So it's naturally going to have obstacles and challenges. Even the best planned aquarium is going to be. So what I'm getting at is, it's never going to be perfect, and maybe it will be, but you have to find happiness with it not always being perfect. And anyone who runs a reef tank knows there's always one coral or one fish that's not eating enough. And I'm not saying to just say, well, that's normal. understand why, but in reality, or the reality of it is that it's hard to have everything always happy all the time. And if you let that one thing bring you down, you'll have this constant string of moments where you're not happy. So trying to put yourself in a mindset where it's all good, it's okay to have one or two things, it's not perfect, just enjoy the tank. And I think it's a lot of self-conditioning.
So I'm gonna give you a personal story, man. Like, okay, so when I set up the 360 in my house, right? Like, this was supposed to be the like Ryan's tank or Ryan's house, whatever, right? It was gonna be this big thing, and man, I just really wanted it to be. And then, you know, meanwhile, I got this, you know, 2-year-old kid, my wife's pregnant, COVID's going on, we're all gonna die, you know, like it's just like total craziness is happening, and this tank just isn't going the way that I want it to go, and I don't really know why, and like I'm just overwhelmed, man, did it bum me out.
Yeah.
Man, it's just like,
well, our mood is tied to our passions,
yeah.
you know, our hobbies, and it's hard to break that.
Well, and then like, because you're bummed out, man, it's like you just don't want to work on it either, man. It like can overwhelm you, you know? So like in this spirit of what you're talking about, man, extract happiness from it never being perfect. Like, I will say that because it was on camera, I'm sharing my pain with everybody in the universe. Yeah. It's probably more intense. But like, if it was going home like way privately, like, remember, man, the best tanks are gonna come from. There's gonna be challenges, dude. Like, just like let them be and find your way to the other side. Yeah. But you also shared with me a story about a guy that was spending too much time on it, and the tank got better in the inverse.
Yes. Well, so on the flip side, if you put too much time into it, now your expectations go up, and now you're hyper tuned to all the little things, the little noises, the fact that this plant or coral is not doing what it's supposed to. So if you take a step back and you can find a balance where you're not overly maintaining it and walking through the room and enjoying it, that might be the secret to getting to a point where you really enjoy it. I can speak for myself with my personal aquariums at home. They obviously look the best the day after I do a maintenance or do algae on everything, just like perfect. So I try to go into that room as often as I can to get that enjoyment out of it. But I also don't let myself get down, because I know it's just part of the journey that they're naturally gonna, you know, go downhill, not go downhill, but get algae and whatnot. So you try to come up with a maintenance plan that balances the time you have in life, or also, you know, keeping them looking good.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is the characteristics of the best tanks you've ever seen. And Joe has joined us for 4 topics like this one. So if you haven't seen the other ones, go ahead and join them, and other special guests and more episodes of 52 SE right here.